Sara is about to be blamed for something she didn't do, and when it happens, no one is going to question it. That's the real horror hiding inside From right now. Not the monsters outside, not even the mystery of the town itself, but a slow, calculated setup that has already begun and is almost impossible to stop. Because the moment Sophia chose to move in with Sara, the entire game changed. And the most dangerous part? It already feels normal. At first glance, the situation looks simple. Sophia tells Kenny she wants to stay with Sara. It comes off like an emotional decision, a lonely girl choosing connection in a place that constantly strips people of it. Kenny hesitates, understandably, because Sara's past still lingers like a shadow over every interaction she has. But eventually, he allows it. Sara, caught off guard, accepts. On the surface, it feels like progress, like healing, like maybe, just maybe, Sara is finally stepping out of isolation. But something doesn't sit right. Sophia knows things she shouldn't know, specifically about what Sara did to Elgin, not in a vague, rumor-based way, but with a level of awareness that suggests direct knowledge. Kenny notices it, even if he doesn't fully act on it. And that moment, small as it seems, is where the entire illusion begins to crack. Because Sophia is not just Sophia, she is the man in yellow, and this decision isn't emotional, it's strategic. Here's where most people are still underestimating what's really happening. The man in yellow didn't choose Sara because she's weak, he chose her because she's already compromised in the eyes of everyone else. Sara doesn't exist in this town as a neutral figure. She exists under suspicion. She hears voices, she's acted on them, she's crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. Even when she's trying to do the right thing, people don't fully trust her. And that means if something goes wrong, she doesn't start from zero, she starts from guilty. That makes her the perfect target, not just for manipulation, but for narrative control. Because in a place like this, perception is everything. People don't just react to events, they react to what they believe about the person involved. And Sara has already been labeled. The man in yellow doesn't need to convince the town she's dangerous. That work is already done. Now think about how this plan actually plays out. It's not about random violence. It's not about chaos for the sake of chaos. It's about precision. Imagine someone in the town ends up dead shortly after a moment of visible tension involving Sara. Maybe it's an argument, maybe it's a disagreement, something small but noticeable enough to stick in people's minds. Then Sophia, quiet, calm, and seemingly trustworthy, mentions that Sara wasn't acting right, that she seemed unstable, that maybe the voices were back. That's all it takes. Not an accusation, just a suggestion. Because once that seed is planted, the town does the rest. Fear fills in the gaps. Assumptions harden into conclusions. And suddenly, Sara isn't just a suspect, she's the obvious answer. The man in yellow doesn't need to expose himself, doesn't need to defend anything, doesn't need to run. He controls the narrative without ever stepping into the spotlight. But what if it goes deeper than that? What if Sara isn't just being framed, but reshaped? Because living with her gives the man in yellow something far more valuable than proximity. It gives him influence, daily access to her thoughts, her fears, her doubts. And Sara is already fragile. She questions herself constantly. She doesn't know whether the voices she hears are guiding her or misleading her. She lives in a constant state of uncertainty. Now imagine someone subtly reinforcing that uncertainty, nudging her, confusing her, making her doubt her own instincts just enough. That's not just manipulation, that's conditioning. And once someone stops trusting themselves, they become incredibly easy to control. This is where the voices become the most critical piece of the puzzle, because Sara's connection to them has always meant something. They've never felt random, they've always carried intent. The real question is whether that intent aligns with the man in yellow or opposes him. If the voices are connected to the same force, then Sara has been part of this system from the beginning, and the man in yellow moving in is simply tightening control. But if the voices are something else entirely, something separate, maybe even opposing, then Sara might be the only person receiving information that could expose what's really happening in the town. And that would make her dangerous. Not in the way the others think, not as a threat to them, but as a threat to whatever's controlling everything behind the scenes. Which means the man in yellow doesn't just want to control Sara's actions, he wants to control what she hears. Or worse, make her stop trusting it altogether. Because the moment Sara disconnects from those voices, she loses the only edge she has. Kenny's role in all this is more important than it seems. He isn't just an observer, he's a pressure point. Kenny already carries emotional tension when it comes to Sara. There's history there, resentment, confusion, unresolved anger. And the man in yellow doesn't need to manipulate him directly, he just needs to create the right conditions. If Sara is accused again, especially in a believable scenario, Kenny is one of the few people who might react emotionally instead of rationally. And once that happens, everything fractures. Because now the situation isn't being driven by facts, it's being driven by feelings. And feelings, in a place like this, are far more dangerous. This is how the town begins to collapse from the inside, not through external threats, but through internal breakdown, through mistrust, through carefully placed doubt. The man in yellow doesn't need to destroy the group himself, he just needs to guide them towards destroying each other. There's also the possibility that the environment itself plays a role in this strategy. Some theories suggest that certain locations in the town carry significance, whether historical, symbolic, or tied to whatever force governs the place. If that's true, then the choice of where to stay isn't random either. By positioning himself in Sara's space, the man in yellow may be gaining control over more than just her. He may be anchoring himself to something deeper within the structure of the town. And that adds another layer to this entire situation. But the most tragic outcome of all of this is still ahead. Because Sara is going to figure it out. At some point, something won't add up. A detail will slip. A pattern will become too clear to ignore. And Sara will realize the truth, that Sophia is not who she claims to be, that the man in yellow is right there, living with her, watching her, shaping everything around her. And she will try to tell someone, and no one will believe her. Not because she's wrong, but because she's Sara. Her past has already disqualified her from being trusted, so even when she's finally right, completely and undeniably right, it won't matter. The truth will exist, but it won't be accepted. And that is the real trap. Because the man in yellow's plan doesn't rely on perfection, it relies on perception. He doesn't need everyone to agree, he just needs enough doubt to exist, enough fear, enough tension. Once those elements are in place, the group takes over. They enforce the narrative, they carry out the consequences, and Sara becomes the center of it all. When you step back and look at everything, the calculated move into her home, the knowledge Sophia shouldn't have, the town's existing mistrust, Kenny's emotional instability, it all connects into one clear pattern. This isn't random. This is a setup, a long, deliberate game that's already in motion. And the scariest part is that the man in yellow might not even care how it ends for Sara, because every outcome benefits him. If she's blamed and punished, he removes a potential threat while deepening the fractures in the group. If she survives but loses all credibility, she becomes isolated, easier to manipulate, easier to monitor, and completely powerless to warn anyone. Either way, he wins. And Sara doesn't even realize she's already trapped inside that outcome. At this point, the monsters outside almost feel secondary, because what's happening inside the town is far more dangerous. This is psychological warfare. This is control at a level that turns people against themselves, that reshapes truth into something unreliable, something disposable. And that leads to the most uncomfortable conclusion of all. Sara is not the most dangerous person in this town. She's the most useful. Because she's the easiest person to turn into whatever the man in yellow needs her to be. A suspect, a scapegoat, or something far worse. And if this plan unfolds the way it's being set up, Sara won't just be blamed, she'll become the weapon that destroys what's left of everyone else.